Okay, this is our ASA 103 and 104 review, part 2. If you've not watched part 1 yet, go ahead and do so over here. We left off the previous video with us sleeping on the boat for our second night, so we'll start here with our second morning. So the game plan for day 2 was to sail out to the Gulf of Mexico and sail to different predetermined GPS points to work on our navigation skills. Now we're going to attempt to do this without ever using the boat's GPS system. So in the morning we sat down, took those GPS points, which mostly were oil rigs out in the Gulf of Mexico, and we plotted them on the chart and then figured out the distance between each one, the bearing we would need to take, and we also took into account the forecasted prevailing wind direction so that we could figure out which marker to head to first, because we wanted to avoid constantly tacking upwind. The whole goal of this exercise was to do navigation the old school way. So in the morning we charted our intended course, then we'd go out to the start buoy and start sailing using only our compass and boat speed and a general bearing to try to hit our waypoint. This is known as deduced reckoning, or for short, dead reckoning, based on only having a solid fix for your starting point, figuring out where you're going to be in the future based on your speed and bearing and whatnot. So as is often the case, you shouldn't expect your plans to survive first contact with the enemy. And the enemy in this case was the wind. As soon as we got out into the Gulf of Mexico, there was no wind. Nothing. Where we were, the wind tends to pick up in the afternoon. As the land heats up, the sea breeze blows in to fill up the heating air that's rising from over the land. Bless you. And we could see that there was clouds forming over land, which meant that the land was starting to heat up and take its air up and form clouds. So we decided we'd sit and wait for a little bit to see if we couldn't get any wind. And we sat there, and we sat there, and we sat there. And after maybe about an hour of just sitting and fiddling with the sails, we had moved maybe 100 meters from where we started. And yeah, that time wasn't all a waste though, because we saw a whole group of dolphins kind of swim up to the boat and swim around and check us out for a little bit. We also saw about a 6-foot long hammerhead shark swim fairly close to the boat, but I didn't get any footage of that because he swam way faster than I realized. After waiting about maybe an hour in the heat, bobbing up and down on the Gulf swells and not making any forward progress with zero wind, we were starting to get a little bit queasy. We decided that the intention of the course was not necessarily to sail, but to practice the navigation. So we gave up and we decided to motor sail to our first waypoint. Once we reached the point where we thought was our goal, we then took bearings using points on the coast, comparing them against the maps to see how close we had actually gotten. Arya, stop it. I'm trying to do a video. Go away. Given the points that we took for our bearings, we were actually really close to our target endpoint. We then turned to our next waypoint and motor sailed to that, which was about an hour, hour and a half from our first waypoint. I don't want to play. which is about an hour and a half away from our first waypoint, and that also went pretty uneventfully. And then we headed in. We gave up on our third waypoint because we'd spent so much time sitting and waiting for wind that we needed to get back and run over the course material before taking the 103 test. After taking the test, it was Juan's turn to cook a meal, and he cooked steak and eggs. Now the lesson to be learned there was that on these small boat grills and these smaller boat ovens, it takes a lot longer for things to cook all the way through, especially meats. And while what Juan cooked turned out to taste really good, he said that that was probably the last time he was going to end up cooking steak on a boat. We were all tired, so we showered and turned in pretty early that night, and the next morning, which was Sunday morning, we woke up and did our review for the 104 test, and then we're preparing to take the 104 test when we all got an alert on our phones saying there was a tornado warning in effect for near our location, which surprised us because it was a nice sunny day. Sure enough, when we looked at the weather radar, there was a storm cell passing not too far south of us, and that's where they had reported seeing a water spout. So we ended up being safe where we were, but it was kind of a bit of excitement and distraction before the 104 test, and it also set us behind by a little bit of time. We took the test, then tidied up the boat to prepare to leave. As we were leaving, we practiced some docking maneuvers, including driving the boat in reverse, even parking in reverse, and then my favorite and most, I think probably one of the most useful things I learned was the standing turn in a monohull. It's a great tool to have in your belt, and especially if you're in a marina that you're unfamiliar with. From there, our celebration/graduation sail was to get us home from Galveston to Kemah, which was about 23 miles worth. And the whole time, our instructor, Captain Dave, was intent on saying nothing and just letting us figure out how to get home on our own. As part of this, we had to go through kind of a ship channel intersection, which you have these large freighters coming from all sorts of directions, and you got to make sure you, first of all, get off on the right exit, but second of all, don't get run over by a big freighter. We tried to sail some of the way home, but the wind was really low at that point, and we were only getting about 3 knots on average, and we needed at least 5 knots of boat speed if we were going to get back to Kemah on time. So we ended up motor sailing the majority of the way back to Kemah, and just kind of riding right on the shoulder of the ship channel, which is a little bit difficult because outside the ship channel, the water depth is quite low. Some places as low as 9 or 8 feet, and the draft of that boat was about 6'3". So it's a little too close for comfort to be sailing in the shallows, but we wanted to stay clear out of the way of the big freighter ships who were coming down. So we had to ride the fine line right on the edge of the channel where we still had about 15 foot of boat depth, but we were out of the way of the big freighters. Right as we got to Kemah, because we had been motor sailing, we were a bit ahead of schedule, so we had enough time to get some real sailing in. And we let Juan be at the helm, and Jessica and I crewed it while Captain Dave was below doing paperwork. And of course, we decided that we just wanted to sail upwind to get the boat heeling really well, and to get the apparent wind up, to get the boat speed up. Because after a day and a half of no wind and having to resort to motor sailing, it was really good to do some real sailing and get some practice in there. Once our playtime was up, we headed back in, and we had to go clean the holding tanks, the toilet tanks basically, at the cleaning station. Which, while that's not a fun job, it's an important thing to know how to do, and I'm glad that that was kind of part of the class. From there, we motored on back to the school, docked the boat, cleaned it up, and did a little tour here so you can see what the boat looked like on the inside. It's about a 39-foot long boat. There's Jessica. So here's the inside. Got our galley. Freezer, fridge, stove, sinks, pots, pans, storage. This is Jessica's my room. Worked pretty well for sleeping. Here's the head. We didn't actually use the shower, but the head worked alright. Bath station. Saloon seating area. It had 2 cabins in it, and the middle seating section can fold down and make another kind of berth bed for people to sleep in. So there was more than enough room for all 4 of us to spend 3 days on the boat. Alright, let's talk about the books and the tests. The books for this course were a lot thicker and more comprehensive than the ASA 101 book, as you might expect. Here they are. This is the 103 book, Coastal Cruising Made Easy, and this is the 104 book, Bareboat Cruising Made Easy. They are both significantly thicker than the ASA 101 book. The Bareboat Cruising book is a little over 200 pages, and the Coastal Cruising is a little over 150, 160 pages. Now, the ASA 101 book, I really enjoyed because every page I was pretty much learning something new. With the 103 book, there was a certain degree of redundancy, and I felt like they kind of copy-pasted some of the text from the 101 into the 103 book. It was less stimulating and less exciting to read. The 104 book is pretty much exactly the same as the 103 book, but has a lot more detail. So if you were only going to read one of them, if you had a time crunch or you felt like being lazy, I'd say read the 104 book, because you're going to probably get 95% of the stuff in here, plus the extra stuff. You should probably read both of them, or at least read 104 and then skim through 103 to look for differences or read tips or whatnot. If you're taking each class individually, then yeah, you're going to read 103 and then 104. So the tests. The 103 test was harder than the 101 test. The 101 test for me was pretty easy, and I kind of blew through it without any hesitation. The 103 test, I still scored very well, but I hesitated a little bit on some of the answers. But overall, I was fine. It was it's still the same. You have 100 questions, and you need to get 80 of them right. The 104 test, I'd say it was harder. It was a challenging test. You definitely need to read the book to get through the 104 test. There are math questions on the 104 test that all relate to navigation stuff. It's going to be questions like, if you start at this time, you're going this bearing, what time, at this speed, what time will you arrive at this destination? Or if you have a course with multiple waypoints, between which waypoint should you refuel to avoid running out of gas? Here's the distances, here's the speeds, stuff like that. The math was a little bit not straightforward. They give you a chart on the back of the book to use. It's a different context, and it feels weird. Another influencing factor is that the 104 test for this combo course is on the morning of day 3. Now, I'm not a morning person, and my brain usually isn't fully functional within the first hour of waking up. Compounded on top of that is you're going to have spent 3 nights on a boat, which if you're not used to is going to wear you down a bit. I mean, they're 3 pretty full days. You shouldn't expect to be running on all cylinders by the time you take the test your 3rd morning. I'd suggest, get some caffeine in you, try to get yourself woken up and fully alert before you take the test. I definitely had answers where I filled in C when I fully meant to fill in D and stuff like that. I screwed up some math problems. So the 104 test is harder, but is passable. You should be set so long as you actually understand the math involved for navigation while you're learning it with your instructor. You don't really care where you're going, you just enjoy riding the bike. But then the 103 and 104, you're learning to prepare to take a journey on your bike, maybe to go mountain biking, and with that comes a whole bunch more of understanding you need to have of basic logistics of the sailboat, cooking on board, toilets, water systems, electrical systems. Learning all that really has nothing to do with setting your sails or trimming your sails or choosing a point of sail. It has nothing to do with any of that. but is vital if you're going to do anything more than just day sailing. And 103, 104 do a very good job of getting you heading in that direction. Stay tuned for our video next week. Like, comment, or subscribe. It helps support the channel. And thanks for watching.